Okay, welcome back. So we're going to look at using the multi-effects inside the Akai MPC. So I'm going to apply the multi-effects mostly to key group instruments, but we're going to look at it in a few different capacities. And again, this video is really meant for the non-experienced MPC user, or the really people that are either starting out or people that are looking into the MPC and kind of checking it out, because it's got a lot of traction since the recent NAM news as it relates to the Native Instruments and the joint venture. And of course, as the new MPC software news for the beta testing has been released. So it's garnered really a lot of attention. So if you're a keyboard player, just so you know, I am, and this platform has a lot of potential. So maybe you'll see some of that in this video. But it's great for sequencing and pre-production. And obviously this is in standalone. And so if what I'm showing you in terms of effects and multi-effects, if that fits close to what you expect, just know that when the DAW companion comes out, that glass ceiling can be even that plus more. All right, so right now I'm going to load in a sort of a cool drum key group instrument. So we're going to do a keyboard. So I'm just going to load a basic instrument. We'll load a DX7 sound. This is a sample from my library. And we'll go into the R synth and I'll load, we'll turn the audition on so we can kind of hear what's going on. So I'll load R sticky, and just for good measure, I'll load a drum sound. So fat rock. So if you want to know a little bit more about sound loading and so forth, check out the video on the channel as far as track management sound loading. All right, so at this point, I've got 3 sounds into this particular project. And obviously it defaulted to the first sequence of 128 that you have available. So I'm just going to go and play a sound. So let's go. First of all, I'm going to play a sound. Okay, so you can hear some effects on here. So effects can be applied in a couple ways. Maybe 2 or 3 different ways. Maybe even 4, depending on... So the way I have the effects here, and this is the way I programmed the sound itself, is that and this goes back from me using Logic Pro back in the day, is I treat effects, instead of using auxiliary sends for the most part, I want that effect to live with the program itself. And the way to do that is, here's the program, here's the channel strip that it's associated to that program, and these effects here in this first channel strip column is tied directly into the actual program itself. So when you load this program, this effect actually automatically comes up by default. Now you can take it off. So just from this page, without going to any other page, I can actually do a long press and take the reverb. It's not taking the reverb out, it's actually bypassing it. So there's no reverb. Same goes with delay. And now I'm just left with the chorus. Okay, so just at a glance, you can just do a long, it's called a long press, and that will temporarily bypass. Now, if you want to go into a specific effect, just tap it. All right, and now you can go edit this particular effect. These cue links now all compile with all the parameters on here. So I can take this to 0. And each cue link, so if you're lucky to have an MPCX, And it does take a lot of practice. I'm going to say this ahead of time to know where these are at. But once you do this through repetition, it just becomes second nature. So I can move from one effect to another without having to go out of this page. Here we go. So now I'm in the delay. Okay. Now, when you're on this particular page specifically, what I can't do is actually choose a different kind of effect. Like, let's say I want a compressor instead of this. On this page, I can't do it. What you do is above this effects rack, you see this little arrow? That takes me to the actual effect configurator. Okay, and now this is where you can rearrange. So let's just say I want the chorus down here and I want the delay above the reverb. Okay, so, and this is where you can completely delete one. We'll just undo that. Or you can go in here, as I said, find yourself something different. So we can use the scroll wheel. I can take it out of the category and we can go direct to dynamics. And we can put the channel strip in there. Now, when I go into a different effect, you can see these cue links, which are, like I said, pretty valuable. You can go in and change the parameters right from the cue link. It's pretty nice to have. So these automatically, the cue links assignments change automatically. Now, a little off topic, but as it related to MPC 2.15, it's ironic because the native instruments plugins in terms of their effects and also the effects parameters from Valhalla. So when you're using this in control mode, all those parameters were already mapped to these. Now I can't speak on MPC 3.0 in terms of software if that's going to occur and or whether other plugins are supported because I'm not actually part of the beta testing team, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Okay, so now, and I'm going to show an example of this later, is if you go into here, let's go back. This little button on top, this is going to allow me to go into the effects rack. So an effect rack would be a multi-chain effect. And you can create your own, by the way. And so here's some of the effects racks right here. And I can go directly to that. All right. So if you go back to this arrow and you see this effects chain, if I want to take this effect and actually create a new effect rack based off of what I have on here, while you're on this page, you can hit the save button, and that rack can just rename it wherever you want, and you can save that. Consequently, if you're in an actual plugin by itself, so this is one plugin, if you've got a setting that you like a lot, you can actually hit the save, and you can save this particular setting in the actual effect plugin itself, not the rack, but the plugin itself, and then you can call that up whenever, for example, this is a chorus. So if I were to save that, I could get to that preset that I created within the actual chorus plugin. All right, so that's pretty useful. So I'm going to show you. So now we're just addressing the effects one channel at a time, if you will. Another way you can do this, if I go into the mixer, if I scroll over to where it says effects, now you can see all the channels, the key group instruments, and you can see the effects that are associated on the actual channel strip itself. So this does not address the sends. The sends page, which we'll revisit, you can control the wet and dry. You get actually 4 sends within a project. Now, again, key group channel strips live with the key group. So when you load the instrument, the key group comes along. So if I go into here, And we'll just replace that instrument with a we'll replace with the piano. When I load this new multi-sample key group, it's going to have its own effect setting, because that's how I program these sounds. And it's going to have the effect setting on the actual channel itself again. And so that effect setting, again, lives with the program, not the actual project. Now the cool thing about it is, if I have two programs right here, are sticky, you hear that it's got delays and so forth on it. If I layer these two sounds, not only the sound's going to be layered, but the unique effects that I created for this and the unique effects I created for that are going to have their own effect property. So it's going to be super big and thick, if you will. So here's one sound, the metal grand. Now as I raise our sticky up, all right, so you get both effects. Now, as it relates to auxiliaries, those actually live not with the program, they live with the actual project. So let's just take an example of an auxiliary. So let's go into here and take this drum kit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an auxiliary. So if I go one step over and go into send, I have up to 4 auxiliaries sends per session, or I mean per project. So just by simply tapping on here, you're going to get a return. So this is your return bus. If I want to select an effect, so here's a reverb. It automatically selected that reverb, by the way. So if I want a reverb on here, I can crank up the send, and this reverb, so it's just let's go back, and I'm going to go and again adjust that send. Now this is on everything, the whole kit. This is on the whole channel strip. All right. Again, if I go to the mixer page, you can see right here. And this is the send 1, send 2, send 3, send 4, so forth and so on. Now, what if I want the let's go back to here. What if I want to send just on the snare drum itself? You can do that. So the way I do it is I do it at the program level, but instead of at the channel strip level, I'm doing it at the program level within the key group instruments. So key group instruments, I'm just going to briefly explain. It's like taking up to 128 separate instruments and then compiling them together into one program. But each instrument that you have has its own properties, whether it's key range, velocity, envelope. It's pretty sophisticated, actually. So, again, I'll have to cover this in another video. But if I go in the program edit, this is where you would apply an effect to one of the key groups or pad instruments. Again, if I click, as you see, every time I hit a new instrument, it's going to be a different pad. That pad is an individual instrument, believe it or not, that's contained within a collection of instruments called, in this case, a drum program. So if I hit the snare, go to the effects, dial up, in the case I said reverb, I could apply this. Now, here's the difference. Let's go into reverb. and there would be just sort of a harsh reverb, but that's okay. It's just an example. So because we're not running this through a send, this mix kind of basically functions as a send. Again, you still have access to all your presets. If you have a preset that you've used, this is the time where you can go in there and quickly access it. And there's the reverb. But just on that instrument pad. See, as I hit a different kit piece, you can see there's nothing on there. All right. Now, you can also, let's just remember, when you do it this way and you save it as a program, this reverb setting lives with the program. It doesn't necessarily live with the actual project itself. Now, if I go into here, let's just delete this from this pad. I can actually go into here and send this out. So now that send will go to whatever I have in the actual session. So it doesn't mean that if I load this sound and I saved it like this would save with the sound, but it wouldn't save the effect. The effect lives with the project. So here's this. The effects routing lives with the program, not the project. Okay. So in this case, if I go to here and I pick a delay, something just outrageous. Okay, so again, that lives with the project when it's on a return, send and return. So here's one last example. I've got a guitar sound that I had programmed like a Stratocaster. So we're going to load this right over the previous drum program. So I might want to create almost like a guitar swell, like if you had a guitar pedal, volume pedal. Now, again, when I programmed this patch, I've got all the effects, and remember, these effects that live on the actual program with the program are pre-fader, which means if I move the fader up and down, and I cut it down, the effects also cut down. And I might want those effects wet. So here's an example of using an actual, or at least for me, a good reason for using the send instead. So I'm going to go into here. I'm just going to mute all these at one time. Okay, and I'm going to go into send. I'm going to tap send. And I'm going to use this button over here. Not this one, but this one here. And I'm going to go into one of these user presets. We're going to go into Strat All. And I'm going to crank this send up. All right. And so, let's see. And we're going to turn the track level up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the automation. And notice when I reduce it, the volume that's coming from the key group instrument is still going to be wet. So if I hit automation right, play it back. So if I go into here, and then there's your swell. So that's an example of using a return to kind of create that kind of effect. little side note. The automation on 2.15, you actually had what they call the MIDI portion of a track. Then you have actually the key group portion of the track mixer. That no longer actually exists anymore. And so I don't know if this is something that's going to be changed in further updates. But in the MPC Key 61 and the MPC Key 37 actually has like a keyboard control layer. And for whatever the reason, that keyboard control layer built into that version of the MPC OS actually has that feature where you can still control MIDI volume. So we're not talking about program volume. Program volume, as you saw here, that's like going to your, let's say Core Triton and literally turning the actual instrument volume. Okay, and so MIDI volume is different. It's just automating the MIDI. It's kind of a thing that I don't know if it's something that I actually need to suggest or not. But showing you the way I routed the return is a way to create that same kind of effect. And it's just effective. It just means that you have to route your effects to return. So anyway, hopefully this sort of demystifies, again, the effects of the Akai MPC. And everyone, until next time, peace out.